Have you ever imagined spending 10 years locked in a room? Not because someone trapped you there, but because your own mind became the prison? I lived it. 10 years staring at the same walls, hearing the same silence, feeling the same weight on my chest. And it wasn't because of chains or bars. It was because of the war. What I faced outside stayed with me inside, as if the battles had never ended. Every noise from the street felt like a gunshot. Every slam on the door sent shivers down my spine. I hid, trying to find safety, but the truth is fear was with me, sitting in the same room day and night. You might be wondering, how does anyone survive this long without going crazy? The answer is that we do go a little crazy, yes. But the worst part is that the pain becomes part of who you are, as if it were impossible to separate what happened from who you've become. Have you ever been there? Feeling that even at home the world is too dangerous to face? Isolating yourself because it's too loud, too fast, too scary outside? Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. I remember the first few months after returning. People would say, "You're safe now," but safety was an empty word to me. The sound of helicopters still echoed in my head. The voices of my companions still screamed in my memories, and the ghosts of what we saw there remained. Day after day, the nights were the worst. The darkness seemed to bring back everything I was trying to forget. So I'd stay in the same corner, hugging my knees, waiting for the sun to rise to be certain I was still here. Time passed, and that room became my only safe place. I knew the exact position of every piece of furniture, every crack in the wall. The sound of the street outside became my clock. The rumble of the garbage truck, the hurried footsteps of someone heading to work, the distant whistle of a train. Every noise reminded me that the world kept turning, but I was stuck in the same place. 10 years watching life unfold through the crack in the window. 10 years living with the fear of opening the door. But even amidst all this silence, something inside me kept beating. A will to live, a spark of hope that refused to fade. I didn't know how to take the first step, or if I'd be able to look someone in the eye again. But deep down, I wanted to believe there was a way back. And it was when everything seemed to be on edge that something unexpected happened. A knock on the door. Simple. 2 sharp knocks that echoed inside me like a call. For a few seconds, I froze. My heart raced, my hands sweated, and I stood there, unsure whether to answer or pretend I wasn't there. That knock was the beginning of something I could never have imagined. A silent invitation to escape my own captivity. But I wasn't ready yet. There was still too much pain to face, too many memories to confront. And that's what I want to tell you about now, because this story doesn't end here. And perhaps this is where I need to open my heart even more. Because this story isn't just mine. It could be yours too. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. Perhaps you've also faced a time when you felt trapped, alone, and unsure of how to escape. Sharing this can help not only you but also others who read it and realize they're not alone. This is the space for this, for us to support each other, listen to each other, and grow stronger together. And if this content is already moving you in some way, take advantage and like it right now. It seems simple, but when you like the video, it reaches more people who may need to hear this message today. This is how we transform an individual story into a movement that inspires and gives hope to many. And I have a special invitation for you. Subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about real stories, about pain, overcoming, and new beginnings. When you subscribe, you're saying to me, I want to continue walking this journey with you, and that gives me the strength to keep bringing you stories like this. So comment, like, subscribe, because what comes next is even more intense. That knock on the door was just the beginning, and I want to take you with me to the moment when everything began to change. After that knock on the door, I stood still, as if time had frozen. It was as if the sound echoed not only in the hallway, but inside me, in every memory I'd tried to bury over the years. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest ache, and for a moment I considered pretending I hadn't heard anything. But there was something different about that moment, a mixture of fear and hope I hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if life was calling me back outside, beyond the 4 walls that had become my world. I need to tell you that that room was much more than a physical space. It was my shield against everything I couldn't face. Outside, every noise felt like a threat. I would wake in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, my heart racing, feeling as if I were still on the battlefield. The screams of my comrades came to me as if they were there, in the same room, pleading for help. And when the silence returned, it weighed on me like a suffocating blanket. It wasn't just loneliness, it was the fear of losing control, of reliving everything that had happened. I spent hours staring at the wall, as if it would give me some answer. The days blended together, and I only knew time was passing because I saw the light change color, filtering through the cracks in the window. That was my calendar, my clock, my way of knowing the world outside was moving on. Life went on, but I was frozen in place. It's strange to say, but in a way, that room was the only place where I felt I could breathe, where I had the illusion that nothing bad would happen. At the same time, it was as if every object there reminded me that I was no longer the same person who walked through the door the day I returned from the war. I remember the musty smell, the creaking wood beneath my feet, the clothes thrown in a corner because there was no point in getting ready. I even avoided the mirror because seeing my own face was like staring into a stranger. The man reflected there bore invisible scars, scars that no one could see, but that burned inside. This was the real impact of war, not just what happens on the battlefield, but what it leaves behind when it's over. People think the soldier returns home and everything is fine, but no one sees the behind-the-scenes story, the weight we carry in our minds and hearts. And every decision I made seemed to add to that weight. If I answered the door, I'd have to face the world. If I didn't, I'd remain trapped in the same cycle. It was as if there was a hidden truth in every choice. I could continue surviving or finally start living. But starting to live meant opening wounds, facing memories, allowing someone to see me vulnerable. And that was the hardest part. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what happened after that day completely changed my mindset. It wasn't a quick transformation, nor was it a pretty sight. It was painful, messy, full of setbacks, but it was real. I began to realize that every small action could be a step out of the prison I'd created for myself. Opening the window and feeling the wind on my face was one of the first things I did. It sounds simple, but for me it was like breathing for the first time in a long time. Each day I tried something new, listening to music, going through dusty things, writing down what I felt. These small actions lit a flame I thought had been extinguished, and it wasn't easy dealing with the ghosts that came with it. Sometimes a song would make me cry with rage. A memory would knock me down for days. But I began to understand that healing comes from going through the pain, not avoiding it. It was as if my own body was telling me, you need to feel it in order to let it go. And so slowly I began to allow myself to feel again. I discovered that loneliness didn't have to be my only companion, that I could rebuild a life even with all the scars I carry. Each step was a victory. Every time I approached the door, even if it was just to put my ear to it and listen to the sounds of the world, I felt a little more alive. And it was in this process that I understood that my story didn't have to end in that room, that there was something waiting for me out there, something I didn't yet know what it was, but it seemed to be calling me. Write in the comments, I want to open the door, to show that you're also ready to take the next step on this journey. Have you ever felt trapped even though you're free? Ever felt like the world outside is moving too fast and you just can't keep up? I've experienced exactly that. I saw people smiling, going to work, meeting in cafes as if everything were normal. And there I was inside my room, feeling miles away from it all, even though I was just a few steps from the door. It's strange because no one actually locked me in, but it was as if there was an invisible key preventing me from turning the doorknob. Every time I thought about leaving, my entire body would freeze, and fear would overwhelm me in a way only those who have felt it know. Maybe you've experienced something like this. Not necessarily because of a war, but because life sometimes confronts us with pain that makes us retreat, that pushes us inward, where it seems safer to stay. The hardest part is when you try to explain it to others and they don't understand. Just get out, they say. Just face it, as if it were simple. But what no one sees are the scars that don't show on the outside, the thoughts that seem to scream constantly, the flashbacks that appear when you least expect it. It's like a movie playing in your mind, replaying the most difficult scenes, and you can't turn it off. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching the days pass without truly being a part of them. And it's at this point that the loneliness becomes heavier, because you begin to believe that no one could understand what's going on inside you. And when you start to believe this, it's like you're building a wall around yourself. Every disappointment, every fear, every painful memory becomes a brick, and suddenly you're surrounded by walls you helped build yourself. The room, once a place of rest, becomes a hiding place. A place where you protect yourself, but also where you imprison yourself. And the longer you stay there, the harder it is to leave. It feels like the outside world will swallow you up if you try. It feels like everything unknown has become a threat. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because there's a hidden truth here that few people talk about. Isolation may seem safe, but it sickens us inside. It saps the color from things, diminishes our ability to feel joy and even to dream. The mind begins to believe there's no way out, that this is the best you can have. And that's where the danger lies. Because you begin to accept a reduced version of life. You begin to believe it's normal to live at a minimum, without experiencing what's outside. But I've learned that transformation begins precisely at the point where you decide to break this cycle. The decision may be small, opening the curtains, responding to a text, taking a step out of bed, but it's powerful. It's the first step toward something new. I won't romanticize this process. It was painful. It was full of falls and setbacks. But each time I chose to get up, I gained a little more strength. It was as if, with each attempt, I was proving to myself that there was still life beyond the trauma, that I could build a new mindset, that I could reconnect with the world. And so, one day at a time, I began to discover that life had more to offer me than just that room. The most interesting thing is that when you start taking these steps, something inside you changes. It's almost as if you're accessing a new part of yourself, a version that had been dormant. That's where courage, hope, and the will to start over reside. This is the true revelation. The strength you seek is often closer than you imagine. It's not in the past, nor in the future. It's within you, waiting to be activated. Have you ever felt this way? Have you realized you were living behind invisible walls and that you needed to tear them down to truly live again? Comment below. I want to tear down my walls, just to show that you're also on this journey to freedom. Time inside that room didn't follow the same rhythm as the world outside. It was as if the clock's hands had lost their speed, as if each second resolved to stretch out until it felt like an eternity. I would wake up not knowing if it was Monday or Friday, and sometimes I wasn't even sure I really wanted to know. Light streamed in through the crack in the window and drew lines on the floor, which shifted throughout the day, as if reminding me that even standing still, time continued. The sound of the street was my only sign that life still existed. Hurried footsteps, distant voices, the rumble of a delivery truck, children running and laughing. Each sound seemed to call me, but at the same time it reminded me of the abyss that lay between me and it all. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before I knew it, years had passed. I had memorized every detail of that room, the crack in the wall, the exact spot where the floor creaked, the smell of wood mixed with dust that never quite left. Sometimes I would lie there staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine what it would be like if I simply disappeared. No one would know in that moment. It was as if I were invisible to the world, as if my absence made no impact. This thought, while painful, gave me the strange feeling of safety. My body began to adjust to the isolation, and it was frightening. The silence, which had initially been suffocating, became almost a companion. I spoke little, sometimes just to hear the sound of my own voice, as if I needed reassurance that I was still here. There were days when I didn't even get up, and others when I rearranged the furniture just to feel like I had some control over something. Small decisions like these became huge. It was an attempt to show myself that I still had the power to choose, even if it was just about where to put a chair. The clock on the wall seemed to mock me, its ticking louder than any other sound. It marked time cruelly, reminding me that the world went on while I remained trapped. There were mornings when I felt the warmth of the sun beating down on my skin, and for a few seconds I imagined I could open the door and run out, feel the wind on my face, hear the noise of the city close by. But all it took was a stronger memory for the fear to return, and I would shrink back down. It was a constant internal struggle, as if two versions of me were fighting inside, one that wanted to live again, and the other that wanted to hide forever. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a side to the story almost no one sees. How much the mind transforms when you live alone for so long. Little by little, isolation shaped my mindset. I began to distrust everything, even myself. A louder noise and my body reacted as if on war alert. A familiar smell could bring back memories so vivid I could feel my heart racing. It was as if the ghosts of the past had found a comfortable place beside me. And worst of all, over time I began to believe that this was the only life possible. The impact of this was profound. People outside saw me as distant, perhaps strange, but no one knew what I was truly struggling with. Inside, it was a daily battle to maintain any hope. And yet, There were small moments when something inside me insisted on believing I could get out of there. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A desire to see the street again, to hear the sound of people without fear, to relearn how to live. I didn't know if I would ever have the courage to take that step, but that small spark kept me from giving up completely. The years of isolation were like a long night, a night that seemed endless. But I knew that somehow, at some point, the sun would have to rise, and when that day came, I wanted to be ready to open my eyes and see the light. Comment, I want to see the sun rise. To show that you are also ready to see the light after a dark time. There was a day when I thought I'd never leave there, that room would be my tomb. I remember waking up and feeling such a weight on my chest that it felt impossible to breathe. The air was heavy, the silence deafening, and something inside me told me that this would be another day lost in emptiness. But unlike the others, there was something deeper that day, a feeling of exhaustion, as if I'd reached my limit. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands on my head, and felt the tears streaming down my face. It wasn't a light cry, it was a cry of despair, as if everything I'd been holding in for years had decided to come out at once. The hidden truth I'd avoided facing was that I wasn't just afraid of the outside world. I was afraid of myself, of what I might become, if I continued in that cycle of pain and isolation. The clock hands seemed to taunt me, turning slowly, as if to remind me that each minute was a choice, to continue existing or to give up trying. I looked at the door, and it seemed like a portal impossible to cross. The handle, so simple, seemed to weigh tons. I lay down on the cold floor and stayed there for hours, feeling my body grow weary as if surrendering. For a moment, I thought it would be easier to never get up again. The fear of opening the door was the same fear of living, of being seen, of facing the memories that came like waves. It was there in that moment that I realized the size of the prison I had created within myself. And it's strange how the mind works when you're at rock bottom. Suddenly, all the inner voices grow louder, clearer. I heard every thought I'd tried to ignore over the years. The regret for the decisions I'd made. The guilt for those left behind. The feeling that I didn't deserve a second chance. The war had ended outside, but inside me it was still raging. It was as if the backstage of my mind was being exposed and I couldn't turn it off. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this was the point where something began to change, albeit painfully. When you reach your limit, there's a part of you that has to choose. Either you surrender completely, or you cling to the slightest possibility of transformation. And it was this small spark that kept me from losing myself completely. I lay there lying on the ground and thought, if I survive the war, why can't I survive myself? That question was like a spark in the dark. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to get out of there. But in that moment, I decided it wasn't the end yet. Getting up was difficult. My legs were shaking. My body felt like it had forgotten how to move. But that small act of standing up was the first conscious decision I'd made in a long time, and I realized the impact of it. It wasn't just getting up from the floor, it was choosing to keep going. It was giving myself a chance to see if there was something beyond that room. That was the day I started writing in a notebook. I wrote everything down, my thoughts, my fears, my memories, as if I wanted to lift the weight off my chest and put it on paper. Each word was like a silent cry for help. There were days when I couldn't write anything, just stared at the blank page, but even that became part of my journey. It was as if I were finding myself again, slowly, between one line and the next. And the more I wrote, the more I understood that memories wouldn't simply disappear, but that I could find a way to live with them without them destroying me. This was one of the greatest revelations for me. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to look at it without letting it consume you. Still, I won't lie. There were relapses. Days when I went back to bed and lay there powerless, unwilling to fight. But even on those days, something inside me felt different. I knew I had taken the first step, and that, however small, it had changed everything. The room no longer felt just like a prison, but also a battlefield where I was relearning how to live. Have you ever felt that breaking point, that moment when everything seemed too heavy, but you still chose to keep going? Write in the comments, I choose to keep going. Just to show that you too decided to get up, even when it seemed impossible. It was then that I heard something that changed everything. A knock on the door. A dry, firm knock that echoed through the room as if it had broken through every barrier I had built over the years. My entire body reacted. My heart raced, my hands went cold, and for a moment I felt as if I were back at the front, waiting for the worst. The sound was simple, but the impact was devastating. That knock seemed to say, "You are still alive, and the world is still out there." I sat paralyzed, sitting on the floor staring at the door as if it were a living being, waiting for what would come next. The silence that followed was even more intense than the sound that preceded it. I took a deep breath, trying to control the panic rising in my chest. 1,000 questions raced through my mind at once. Who could it be? Had someone finally noticed I was there? Or was it just a mistake? Someone knocking on the wrong door? The darker side of my mind even imagined it was some kind of threat, as if the world were punishing me for isolating myself for so long. This is the hidden truth about isolation. It distorts perception, makes you believe everything out there is dangerous, that every sound is a warning. I stood slowly, every muscle tense, as if preparing to face something I couldn't quite grasp. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last, as if I were wading through years of pent-up fear. The floor creaked, the sound echoing along with my heartbeat. I approached, leaned my forehead against the door and stood there, listening. Silence. Just the distant noise of the street, the world continuing outside. For a moment I considered retreating, returning to the corner where I'd been, but something inside me told me I couldn't miss this opportunity. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because that moment was a revelation. I realized that, more than fear, I felt curiosity. And curiosity can be as powerful a trigger for transformation as despair. It was as if that knock had awakened something dormant inside me, something I still wanted to experience. I didn't know who was out there, but the feeling that someone cared was enough to make me want to turn the doorknob. It wasn't just a physical door. It was a boundary between the life I knew and the life I could still have. I remained silent for a few seconds, my hand suspended, feeling the cold metal of the doorknob without actually turning it. It felt like my mind was in slow motion, weighing every decision I'd made up until that day. It was a crossroads. I could go back and hide, or I could open it and discover what was on the other side. The truth is, no matter how hard you try to protect yourself, there always comes a time when the world finds a way to call you back. This was my way. 2 sharp knocks and a silence full of possibilities. I took the first step. I didn't open the door right away, but just being there standing was a victory. I ran my fingers along the wood as if trying to feel the reality of what was happening. The sound returned, softer this time, as if the person outside knew I was there, hesitating. And it was in that instant that I felt something new. It wasn't just fear, it was hope. A small but intense spark of hope burning in my chest. The doorknob finally turned a little, not because of my hands, but because the person on the other side insisted. It gave me a jolt of adrenaline, but also courage. I wasn't ready to speak, nor to leave, but that gesture reminded me that life wouldn't wait forever. It was now or never. Have you ever felt this kind of calling? That feeling that something is knocking at your door, begging you to step outside even when fear still screams? Comment below. I heard the knock, just to show that you also recognize this moment when life calls. When I finally decided to open the door, my hands were shaking. It felt like I was trying to move a mountain, even though I knew all that separated me from the outside was a thin sheet of wood and a cold doorknob. I turned slowly, feeling the click echo inside me like thunder. The door opened a few inches, and suddenly a beam of light shot through the room, illuminating every corner I'd kept in the shadows for years. That light seemed almost aggressive at first, as if it were exposing everything I'd hidden from myself. But at the same time, I felt something different, a kind of relief, as if that ray of light were proof that the world was still there, waiting for me. The air that rushed in was the first breath of life I'd felt in a long time. It was just the smell of the hallway, mixed with dust and something undefined, but for me it was like breathing freedom for the first time. I approached the opening and, for a moment, hesitated. Each step felt like a ton of weight, but when I stepped outside, I felt something inside me reborn. The ground felt different. The sound of my own footsteps felt clearer, as if I were registering the beginning of a new journey. It was a simple hallway, the same one that had always been there, but to me it felt like another universe. My entire body was on alert, every sense heightened. I heard the distant sound of a radio coming from some apartment, the echo of someone descending the stairs, the creak of a door ahead. It was as if I were rediscovering the world for the first time. I touched the hallway wall, feeling the roughness of the paint, and was moved by something so simple. I had spent years avoiding all contact, and here I was touching the world again. With each breath, I felt some of the fear dissolve, albeit slowly. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because this first step wasn't just physical, it was mental. It was a shift in mindset, a decision to no longer allow the bedroom to be my only setting. I knew there was still a long way to go. I knew the fear wouldn't disappear overnight, but I also understood that I didn't need to completely overcome it to move forward. I just had to take one step at a time. This revelation was liberating because it showed me that transformation isn't about grand gestures, but about small, consistent movements. I sat on the hallway floor, leaning against the wall, feeling the light hit my face. I didn't need to go any further that day. Just being there was enough. It was as if I had crossed an invisible border. I remembered everything that had held me back until then, the guilt, the fear, the memories, and realized that none of them had disappeared. They were still with me, but somehow they seemed smaller. Maybe because for the first time in a long time I was choosing life, choosing to step out of the darkness and face the unknown. The door behind me was still open, and I stared at it like someone I'd look at an old acquaintance. I knew I could go back if I wanted, that the room would still be there, but I also knew that every minute I spent outside of it would make me stronger. It was a delicate balance, a dance between what was safe and what was necessary for growth. In that moment, I decided I would no longer let fear dictate all my decisions. The impact of this simple act was enormous. When I returned to the room, everything felt different. The wall seemed smaller, the silence seemed less heavy. It was as if that place had lost some of the power it had over me, and that gave me the courage to try again the next day, and the next, and the next. It was a journey of discovery, of relearning how to live, of rebuilding my trust in myself and the world. Have you ever had that moment when you opened a door in your life and experienced the world differently? Write in the comments, "I took my first step," to show that you too are ready to leave your own inner chamber. It didn't happen overnight. After that first step out of the room, I felt like I'd carried the weight of a lifetime on my shoulders. I went back inside, exhausted, sat on the floor, and cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness, it was a cry of relief and fear at the same time, because I knew something had changed and that there would be no going back. In the following days, I repeated the ritual. I opened the door, took a deep breath, took a step or two, and returned. Each time I did this, I felt my heart race as if I were running a marathon. There were days when I couldn't leave at all. I would stare at the doorknob for long minutes, feeling the sweat dripping down my hands until I decided to back out. And it was frustrating. But little by little, I began to realize that simply trying was progress. It didn't matter if I managed to stay out of the room for 10 minutes or just 10 seconds. The important thing was not to give up. This was the beginning of a new phase in my journey. I had to relearn how to live with myself. When you spend so much time in silence, you get used to hearing only your own thoughts, and they're not always kind. It was difficult to face the inner voices that told me I wasn't strong enough, that I didn't deserve a second chance, that the world had no place for someone like me. But I began to respond to these voices. I began writing down what I felt, transforming the chaos into words. At first it was painful, because putting everything that was bottled up inside me on paper was like opening a wound. But with each page, I felt the weight lighten a little. The first conversations were a chapter in themselves. I remember the first time I tried to greet a neighbor. My hands were shaking, my voice was low and shaky, and I almost gave up mid-sentence. But he smiled, a simple smile, and said, "Good to see you here." That phrase echoed in my head for the rest of the day. Good to see you. It was as if someone had validated my existence again, and that gave me the strength to try the next day. I began to realize that the world wasn't against me. Not every sound was a threat, not every slammed door a sign of danger. It was as if I was reprogramming my mind little by little to see reality in a more balanced way. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because trusting again was perhaps the greatest challenge of all. When you live on high alert for so long, your body becomes accustomed to expecting the worst. It's as if every muscle is ready to react, as if you're always one step away from combat. And learning to let that guard down was a painful process. I had to allow myself to make mistakes. I had to allow myself to be vulnerable. I remember one of the first times I sat on a bench in the square near my home. I was sweating, watching every person who passed, calculating escape routes in my mind as if I were in enemy territory. But little by little, something inside me began to change. I saw a child chasing a ball and laughing loudly. I saw an old man feeding pigeons with a calm I didn't remember feeling. I saw two friends talking and laughing about something silly, and in that moment, I realized that the world still had beauty. I had just forgotten how to look at it. The relapses kept happening. One day I heard fireworks and instantly my entire body reacted as if under attack. I threw myself to the ground, covered my head with my hands, and felt my heart race. I couldn't get up for hours, but when I finally regained my composure, I took a deep breath and thought, this time I won't punish myself for being afraid. And it was liberating. I understood that the healing process wasn't about never feeling afraid again, but about not letting fear completely dominate me. Each relapse became an opportunity to learn, to train my mind to remember that the danger was in the past. Small victories began to accumulate. I managed to enter a supermarket and buy something simple, even though I felt like everyone was watching me. I managed to chat for a few minutes with the bakery attendant, and I left with a shy smile on my face. I began to notice the colors of the street, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of passing cars. It was as if the world was coming to life again. And the more I exposed myself to the outdoors, the more I realized that the room no longer held the same power over me. It still existed, but now it was just a place to rest, not a hiding place. This transformation was slow and full of difficult decisions. I had to choose every day between isolating myself or trying again. I chose to face it, even though I trembled. I chose to open the window, open the door, make room for new experiences. And each choice shaped my mindset, transforming that wounded soldier into someone who could dream again. I still carry scars. I still have days when I feel the weight of the past. But today I know I am stronger than the fear that held me back for so many years. Have you ever gone through a healing process like this, full of falls and small advances? Comment below. I keep trying, to show that you're also on this journey of rising a little stronger each day. Today, the room is no longer a prison. It's simply a place where I rest, where I store memories, and where sometimes I return to reflect. But it's no longer the center of my life. Now my life happens outside. The first time I realized this was almost by accident. I had gone for a walk, something that had previously been a huge challenge, and suddenly I found myself sitting in the square, watching the people move by without feeling the urge to run away. The wind blew on my face, the sun warmed my skin, and for the first time in many years I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. It wasn't just the world that had changed, it was I who had changed inside. With each step I took away from my room, it was as if a layer of fear was peeling away. I began to realize that isolation had taught me to see details I'd previously ignored. The way the morning light paints the facades of houses, the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the laughter of a child running across the street, all of this felt new. I was rediscovering the world. It was a strange feeling, because along with this rediscovery came a certain mourning for the time I'd lost. But instead of paralyzing me, this mourning became fuel. I didn't want to waste another day trapped in a place that no longer defined me. It was then that I found others like me. At first I felt out of place, as if my story were too heavy to share, but little by little I realized that each person there carried a hidden truth, a story that had broken them inside. At the support meetings I listened intently, absorbing every story, every tear. There was something powerful about being in a place where no one had to pretend they were okay. The first time I spoke was difficult. My voice cracked. My hands sweated, but I kept talking. I told them about the room, about the silence, about the day I almost gave up. When I finished, there was a different silence, a silence that didn't scare me. People looked at me with empathy, some moved closer, and in that moment, I understood that sharing didn't make me weak. It made me human. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this discovery completely changed my mindset. Before I believed that telling my story would be like reliving the trauma, but I realized it was just the opposite. Every time I spoke, every time I put into words something that hurt me, it was like pulling a thorn out of my chest. Yes, it hurt at first, but then came a feeling of relief, of freedom, and more than that, every person who reached out to say, "I felt that way too," gave that pain new purpose. Suddenly my experience was no longer just mine. It became a point of connection. I began seeking out these moments more often. I started attending meetings regularly, then volunteered to help with the organization. It was small, making coffee, setting up chairs, welcoming everyone, but it was significant. It was as if I were rebuilding, brick by brick, the bridge that connected me to the people. And it was in this process that I began to see meaning in what I had experienced. The impact of seeing another veteran head down, look at me, and crack a smile after hearing my story was indescribable. I saw hope reborn in the eyes of those who no longer believed in anything, and that nourished me in a way that no isolation could. Some of these encounters became profound. I remember a young man who arrived saying he saw no reason to continue living. He spoke with the same voice that had once been mine, low, tired, full of shadows. I sat beside him, unhurried. I didn't try to fix his pain. I simply shared mine. I told him about the years I'd spent trapped in my room, about the days I'd wanted to disappear, about the click that made me open the door for the first time. He listened to me silently, and at the end, said something I'll never forget. If you could do it, maybe I can too. That day, I understood that what saved me could save others. Over time, I began writing letters and messages to veterans who couldn't leave their homes, just as I once couldn't. I wrote about the small victories, about how difficult it is, but also about how each step is worth it. I told them that pain doesn't disappear all at once, but that it can be transformed. These letters began to circulate. Others began writing too, and soon we had a support network functioning even from a distance. This was one of the greatest revelations of my journey. You don't have to be completely healed to help someone. Sometimes, it's precisely in the midst of the process that you become most useful. My room, once a prison, has become a place of creation. The table where I spent hours in silence has become the place where I write messages of hope. The walls that witnessed my worst days now hold photos of the people I met again, the encounters I shared, the moments I chose to live. There's no longer darkness inside, because light streams in freely through the window. It remains my refuge, but it's no longer my prison. Today, I know this journey doesn't end here. There's always someone who needs to hear that it's possible to emerge from the darkness, someone who needs to see that there are still paths to follow. My purpose now is to be that living proof. I'm not a hero. I'm not someone who won every battle, but I am someone who decided to keep fighting. And that decision has allowed me to find meaning in every scar I carry. Have you ever felt that the pain you've experienced can become a beacon for someone who's lost? Write in the comments, "My pain has meaning," to show that you too are learning to transform what hurt you into something that can inspire others. Maybe you too are trapped in some room in your life. It doesn't have to be a physical space. Sometimes it's a memory, a wound, a fear you can't face. I know what it's like to look outside and feel like the world is too distant, too noisy, too dangerous. But I also know there is a way back, even if it seems impossible at first. Opening that door can be scary, but it's also the first step toward freedom. Every small movement counts, every decision to try again, every choice not to give up. The truth is, no one is truly alone on this journey, even when everything feels empty. I've discovered that the simple act of sharing my story has already been part of my healing process. Perhaps telling yours is the beginning of yours. Sometimes, putting our feelings into words is the way to lift the weight off our chest and put it out into the world so it doesn't crush us. That's the beauty of stories, they build bridges. When you tell yours, someone on the other side feels less lost, less broken. The impact is greater than you can imagine. This is how we begin to transform pain into something that inspires, something that builds. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because there's something we rarely talk about: the power of recognizing where we are. Admitting that you're stuck is already an act of courage. It's not about romanticizing pain, but about facing it head on and saying, "You will not define me forever." This mindset is what changes everything. It's what transforms the backstage of your story into a stage for overcoming. It's at that moment that you understand that every scar can be a reminder of strength, not just suffering. I know it's not always easy to take the first step. I know there are days when your whole body seems to resist, when your mind screams for you to return to the safe place. But I also know that life begins to unfold in a new way when you choose to keep trying. It doesn't matter if you take big or small steps. The important thing is to keep moving forward. This is the great revelation I want to leave you with. It's not about speed, it's about direction. Transformation happens when you decide not to give up. When I look back and see where I started, I realize that every fall, every attempt, every door I hesitated to open brought me here. Today, when someone asks me how I did it, I don't talk about magic formulas. I talk about one day at a time, one decision at a time. I talk about the daily choice to not let fear be the loudest voice. This is the true journey, not the one of those who never feel fear, but the one of those who learn to walk despite it. And maybe this is your turn to take that step. Maybe you're holding the doorknob right now, wondering if you should open it. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to write in the comments, "I'm ready to open the door," to show that you too are choosing to face what holds you back and walk toward your own freedom. If you've made it this far, I think this story spoke to you in some way. So take advantage of this moment and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll continue receiving content that touches us deeply and helps us look within. Also, leave a like, because it shows that this conversation resonated and helps me continue bringing you stories like this. And if you want to show me that you stuck with me until the end, write in the comments, "This message was for me." I'll love knowing you were there until the very end. And since you're here, don't stop now. There's a video right here that complements everything we talked about today. Click and stay with me there, because our journey is just beginning.